the end, only a small wave hit the coastline. In Bangladesh, Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus has appealed against a High Court decision which backed his sacking from his own bank. Last week, the central bank removed the 70-year-old as head of microlender Grameen Bank for being over the retirement age. Allies say the decision is part of a government vendetta. A group of Filipinos who suffered human rights abuses during former President Ferdinand Marcos's rule from 1965 to 1986 have finally received compensation. But what they also want is a formal public apology. Margot Ortigas reports.
The long wait is finally over for these victims of human rights violations. Hundreds queued in Manila to receive a check of $1,000 as compensation for abuses suffered under the Marcos dictatorship. The money recovered from assets in the United States. Bernadette Aquino was a student activist against the regime in the 70s. She spent 2 years in a military prison and was repeatedly tortured.
For me, this is victory. A proof of the truth of what we have always said, that there were human rights violations during those times. But just because we received some sort of compensation now doesn't mean we will stop here. We will continue to demand a public apology for the atrocities they committed against the Filipino people.
But they may have to wait even longer for that.
Person connected with the rebellion.
In 25 years, the Philippine government hasn't managed to successfully try the Marcoses on home ground, much less provide official acknowledgement of any violations committed under the dictator's rule. With the help of U.S. lawyers, the victims filed a class action suit in the United States, where many Marcos assets were held and the deposed ruler himself had gone into exile.
There have been bills in the Philippine Congress since 1992 to compensate the victims, but there's no money to compensate them. So I don't see how it's going to happen. But for the private litigation, these victims would have nothing.
But these people say they are only the tip of the iceberg. There are thousands more like them, unacknowledged and not on the recipient list. And the wheels of justice in their own country have only proven too slow and unreliable once again. Margot Ortigas, Al Jazeera, Manila.
The headlines here on Al Jazeera. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has made a second televised appearance in less than 24 hours, accusing Western nations of seeking to control Libyan oil and wealth. He also said Libyans will take up arms if a no-fly zone is imposed. And in the past couple of hours, we've received reports that 3 of Muammar Gaddafi's private planes have taken off from Tripoli. One of them has landed in Egypt. Carl Stanier-Navarra in Malta sent us this update about one of those planes.
We are told, because I have also contacted sources in Cairo, that one airplane is carrying a senior military Libyan official who is expected to have a meeting with the armed forces commander of the Egyptian junta, the name being Hussein Tantawi Soliman, who is a rather very high-ranking army commander in Egypt. The reason for the meeting, however, is unknown.
Forces loyal to Gaddafi are reportedly closing in on the western town of AlJazeera. Witnesses say tanks are, quote, everywhere, and there are concerns the nearby oil refinery may be caught up in the conflict. Meanwhile, Gaddafi's planes continue to bomb targets in eastern Libya, most of which is now held by the rebels. The strategically important oil city of Ras Lanuf has seen intense fighting. In Egypt, the Prosecutor General has launched an investigation into clashes between Muslims and Christians that killed at least 11 people. More than 1,000 Coptic Christians were protesting against the torching of a church when violence broke out. The country's ruling military council has vowed to rebuild the church and prosecute those responsible. A Tunisian court has dissolved the party of ousted President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. The Constitutional Democratic Rally, or RCD, was suspended last month pending the court's ruling. Ben Ali used the group as a way of maintaining power during his almost 2 decades as leader. The Taliban has claimed responsibility for a suicide attack that's killed at least 37 people in northwest Pakistan. The victims were part of a funeral procession attended by anti-Taliban fighters near Peshawar. Police said 300 people were at the funeral when the suicide bomber hit. And those are the main headlines here on Al Jazeera. Coming up next on the channel, we've got frost over the world. I'll be back at the top of the hour with a full news update. Stay with us.
welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh and the brilliant actor Simon Callow. But first, Israel and Palestine. It's now over a month since the Palestine papers were leaked to AlJazeera, but the consequences are still being felt throughout the region. Believing that the leak came from his office, Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat resigned and the Palestinian negotiation unit has been disbanded. There is now even rumours that the Palestinians will be the next to revolt against their government, not the other lot. And it is suggested that any hopes for a peace deal with Israel in the near future are well and truly over. Joining me here in the studio is a man who spent many hours across the table from Saeb Erekat, the former Israeli chief negotiator, Dr. Oded Iran. Welcome. You spent many hours in negotiation, a lot of them with Saeb Erekat and so on. And now, as we hear, people are saying there is no more hope for negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. No more hope now. What do you think?
I think that for the next 2 years, unless we find a new formula for the negotiations or an objective, other than the full comprehensive treaty between the two sides, we are stuck because the Palestinians have to go to elections, or long overdue. The Americans are already begin their cycle of presidential elections in 2 years, and the campaign is already on its way. Israel itself might go to elections because of domestic political crisis. And so, under these circumstances, I don't see chances for a full, comprehensive peace treaty between us and the Palestinians.
For 2 years?
For almost 2 years, or full 2 years.
A full 2 years
right.
Before that?
Right. Unless we, as I said, we find an alternative, which, as the papers say, and I have been advocating it for more than 2 years, is a partial, incremental sort of way of getting there. It is clear that one important and only solution is the two-state solution. And you have to get there, but not through this comprehensive negotiations, which I don't think can take place now, but through incremental steps on the ground.
And in that situation, what would be the first step? I mean, how would that work?
Well, give you an example.
Yeah.
The West Bank is divided by the Oslo agreements into 3 areas. Area A, where the Palestinians have full authority. Civilian